Well, Yang said. That turned crap faster than I thought it would. Blake shuffled on her bed, still with her hands cupped between her knees. She had neither moved nor spoken since Wyatt left the room. It looked like their leader's words had hit her hard, harder than they'd hit her own. Yang forced herself up into a sitting position and reached over to touch her partner's arm. Don't feel so bad, Blake. You did what you did because you didn't want him to get hurt. Can you imagine how worse it would have been if he had gone along? With his leg injury? He might have even gotten killed. No. Blake whispered. I know it was the right choice. It's just... I don't know. I haven't felt like this in a long while. Like what? Yang asked. Like I'm a disappointment. You're not. Like I disappointed someone then. She sighed. Jaune saved my life, Yang. I owe him a lot, and he went out of his way to help me here. Then I go and turn it on him. It's not a good feeling. Yang didn't think it would be. Maybe that was something about her partner's home life, since having her dad being like she was no stranger to feeling guilty about doing something. It wasn't like she thought her old man was disappointed in her. He was proud, and he always let her know. But that didn't mean there hadn't been a few times she'd done something to disappoint him. Or maybe more than a few times. You did it for good reasons, she repeated. It was really all she could think to say. He's angry, Blake. It'll cool off. What if he doesn't? It will. She nudged Blake's arm. Trust me, honestly, Dad told me off like that plenty of times, and it never meant that he hated me. Thankfully, Nora decided to come to her aid. People fight all the time, the ginger-haired girl said. Even me and Rennie fight sometimes, though he doesn't shout much when we do. It doesn't mean you hate each other. It just means you care enough to get angry. Ruby finished for her teammate. Also, for what it's worth, Nora grinned at Blake. I'm totally used to feeling naughty when Ren gives me looks like that. Trust me, it'll get better and Ren doesn't stay angry. Jaune won't either. Blake smiled at them, or maybe for them. It didn't look very honest, but at least it was there. Yang was fairly sure time would prove Nora right, since it seemed unlikely Jaune would be able to hold a grudge against them forever. He's right to be angry though. Blake sighed. Apparently, she'd come to the same conclusion. He has his reasons to be, Yang said, but that doesn't excuse some of the things he said. It wasn't like it was Weiss's fault. We all went along, yet she took the brunt of it. Honestly, it's probably because she argued back. Anger's like a flame and it feeds off more. Trust me, I know. She gestured towards her hair as she said that, though she meant her fighting style. Everyone seemed to catch on to what she meant though. Honestly, the response was to be expected with Weiss Cream's temper. She wouldn't back down if someone tried to tell her she was in the wrong. All in all, it probably would have just been a telling off and some nasty looks for a few hours if she hadn't reacted. She didn't blame Weiss though. She had been sticking up for them. You know, Ruby offered a tentative smile. It's always a joke with us, but you really do act like a family. Even the way Weiss stood up for you all was like a mother and father having an argument. And the two of you in the doghouse, Nora added. Yang's lips quirked and she snorted at the thought, especially when Blake sent her a dirty look. Hey, it's not my fault. She laughed. You're the daddy's girl who's upset because she disappointed her beloved father. And now Mummy and Daddy aren't talking, Blake said, putting sarcastic emphasis on the titles and rolling her eyes. Is this when we talk about custody settlements? I'll go wherever your dumb dog doesn't. Ruby knelt down to stroke the dog in question. Do you really think it will come to that? She asked. Yang hummed and looked over to her little sister. Come to what? Do you think they'll stop being friends? Nah. Yang grinned and waved her hand. They'll cool down and come back to nagging one another within hours. Both are just angry because they're worried about one another. It would be cute if it wasn't us he was miffed at too. You think it would be that easy? Blake asked. Weiss has quite the volatile temper. She won't accept an apology unless he admits he was wrong. That gave her some pause. It also sent a worrying feeling into her stomach. Blake was right there. Weiss was the kind of person to demand an apology and not stop until she got it. So he apologizes, Yang said, but even as she said it, her smile fell. Do you think he will? Blake asked. Then we make him, Yang said, as if it were as easy as that. How? Blake asked. He's more likely to sulk and lazily take her wrath than work up the energy to apologize, she said, especially if he doesn't think he needs to. Yang groaned. Her face fell into her hands. She was right. More than that, if Weiss didn't apologize to him, then the fight wouldn't come to an end. Normally she figured he would have said sorry even if he didn't mean it, just because an argument would get in the way of him being lazy. This was different, however. Yang groaned again. My thoughts exactly, Blake said. This could go on for weeks. You know full well Weiss won't give up, and I don't think Jaune will either. Yang gripped her hair and shook her head from side to side. No. She rejected. The dance is just in a few days. Those two are not ruining all the work I put into that. What can we do though? Blake asked, sounding as helpless as Yang felt. We can't exactly force them to kiss and make up. Yeah, Yang. What are we going to do? Nora asked, reminding them of her presence with a startling of bubblegum she'd gotten from somewhere. What could a couple of daddy's girls like you two possibly do to make this right? She asked, chewing gum obnoxiously loud. Yang stared at her, not quite understanding, but her sister seemed to. A glimmer lit in Ruby's eyes. Yeah, Yang, Ruby realized, a glimmer rising in her eye. Don't you have Jaune wrapped around your finger? Yang seemed to light up. That's right. If they won't sort this out in time, we'll have to. We? Blake asked warily. The faunus met Yang's gaze for approximately 3 seconds before she quilled. Oh, right. We. Us. Of course, I mean, I'd love to help. So, what are we doing again? Yang grinned and stood up. Her foot slammed down atop her mattress as she struck a heroic pose, one hand in the air. We are going to make things right, she shouted. Our parents are fighting. Our family is in danger. It is up to us, their loyal and awesome daughters, to bring them back together. Blake groaned, but it was Ruby who tilted her head to the side. Isn't that the plot of a movie? She asked. It is. Blake sighed. And one Yang dragged me to see last week. And you said it was unrealistic. She scoffed. It was. Question. Nora held her hand in the air. In the movie, there's always the evil stepmother trying to seduce the husband away and take him for herself. Who's going to take that role? Yang sighed. Knowing Jaune, just about every woman in Beacon. It didn't take as long as Blake had expected to find Weiss. That wasn't because the heiress was particularly predictable, but more to do with how recognizable she was. Small of stature and dressed in all white, she apparently made a rather obvious sight stalking down the corridors of Beacon. That might have had something to do with her temper too, since more than a few people she asked had looked nervous. Weiss was sat at a table in the library, a book on poetry in hand, but judging from how hard her fingers gripped the cover, prose was the last thing on her mind. The book slapped down when Blake took a seat at the table, though Weiss's furious glare receded when she saw who it was. Sorry, the white-haired girl said. I thought you were someone else. Jaune? No. Weiss's answer was far too quick. Why would I think of him? Who cares what that idiot is doing with his time? He can walk off the cliffs of Beacon for all I care. Blake erred on the side of caution, and decided not to dig any deeper into that quagmire. I didn't realize you read poetry, she said instead and nodded towards the book. It was quite the hefty tome. Ashni is expected as much. Why said. There were numerous lessons when I was younger, both in the correct manner of speaking and the value of poetry and verse. I studied art quite extensively. I'm not nearly so learned. I read my books, but the enjoyment of poetry eludes me. It's an acquired taste. Why shrugged? The way the words are linked together, the sentiment hidden in metaphor and the feelings of another being. Transcribed, sent into the mind of the reader. Blake tilted her head to the side, and a small bubble of amusement worked its way through her. Her eyes glinted a little as she smiled. "What's your favorite?" she asked. Weiss sighed and let the book fall onto the table with a suffering expression. Blake laughed. "You hate poetry, don't you?" "It is expected that I appreciate it." Weiss sighed. "But it's so dull. Meaning and symbolism hidden in fancy language, love-struck fools booning the tragedy of unrequited love. If they feel so powerful about it, why not do something instead of waxing lyrical?" "I don't just hate poetry, Blake. I despise it." She should have been surprised, but as Blake shook her head and smiled, all she could feel was a warm fondness for the girl who had, against all odds, become her friend. Ashni and a White Fang member, but then again, Weiss didn't act like how she would have expected Ashni to act. Why read it then? Weiss sighed and laid her arms on the table. "I'll admit," she said. "I just pulled the first thing I could find from the shelf. I needed to read something. Anything. I would have..." "Not your books," Weiss said warily. Blake rolled her eyes. "I was going to say you could have asked me for a suggestion. I know some good stories that would have appealed to you. And no, they're not all of the mature kind. And come on, they weren't even really all that smutty. Wasn't sex a perfectly normal human interaction? Was it so bad that she preferred her epic fantasies and tales to end with a more emotional reward than a chaste kiss on the lips?" "Sorry." The heiress smiled weakly. "And I suppose an apology is in order for snapping at you all earlier. I know Ruby didn't mean anything with her words. It's fine, and I think she knows. You were angry. No one blames you." "I was angry," Weiss admitted. "I still am. I suppose that's why I wanted to read. I have a temper problem, Blake. I know I do. I thought stepping away from the team for a moment would let me get it under control before I said something I might regret." Weiss let out a long sigh, but smiled nonetheless. That means a lot, Blake. Thank you. I know I've not always been the easiest person to get along with, especially with my family name. It's fine. You came and helped me at the docks, remember? He did. Blake didn't miss the anger that flashed onto Weiss's face when she said that, but she pushed on regardless. You came as well, she said. And if you recall, we were as good as dead if it wasn't for you and Yang coming in to rescue us. It might help to get it out of your system. Blake nudged her foot against Weiss's beneath the table. I suppose it might. I'm angry. Jaune, do you even need to ask? Weiss snapped. Her eyes softened a moment later and she glanced away. Sorry. You see what I mean? I can't believe how infuriating he can be. Acting like he owns us. Like, he can tell us what to do. He's worried, and I don't think he meant to upset everyone. I know, Blake. Weiss sighed. Trust me, Blake. I know. But we were worried too, and we didn't react like that. He offered to accompany you on your little jaunts because he didn't want you to get hurt. But the moment we do the same, to try and stop him from getting hurt, we're the bad guys and he chews us out worse than my father ever could. Blake nodded and chuckled softly. That was pretty much exactly how she felt too. It's utter hypocrisy. Weiss went on. And there's nothing I hate more. It's just, I can't believe how angry it made me feel. And then he tried to blame you, to snap at Yang and to accuse me of leading you all to your deaths. I'll admit, something snapped within me. I wouldn't have done that, Blake. Weiss looked into her eyes as she said that, in some attempt to convey the truth in those words. I would never sacrifice my team, my friends, for something like Schnee pride. He didn't say anything about your family. Blake whispered. Weiss glanced away. I know, but that's what I heard. I don't know why. I heard a personal vendetta, and I just instantly thought of my family. I'm not like them, Blake. I'm not that kind of person, and I refuse to be. I know you're not. Blake said, and she meant every word. You're better than your family, Weiss. You're better than I could have ever imagined. And I don't think I ever apologize for judging you because of your name. We all do it. Weiss waved it off. We claim we don't. That we give people the benefit of the doubt, or that we don't judge someone until we know them. But that's all just decoration to make us all feel better about ourselves. There's not a person on the planet who doesn't look at another and make a first impression, who doesn't look at the clothing someone wears, the expressions they show, the way they talk, and then form a judgment from that. Look at me. She laughed. I formed an opinion that my partner was a lazy layabout with no redeeming qualities. And now, he's an arrogant, hypocritical womanizer with no redeeming qualities. Oof. Blake winced. See? Weiss smiled. Even I can be wrong. Okay. So she'd been right on the line when she warned Yang that Weiss was going to be difficult over this. She'd been hurt, and Blake could see that. But between her and Jaune, an apology from either would be a long time coming. So, Blake said, while she racked her brain for something to say, you wouldn't forgive him if he even asked for it? Oh, I would, Weiss said, and for a moment, Blake dared to hope. So long as he got down on his hands and knees and begged for it. I could be magnanimous and forgive him if he does that. Yeah. How very generous of you. Maybe she should have taken Jaune instead. He was angry with her, and that would have made for a difficult conversation. But Yang had probably made that right choice when she picked him. Oh boy. This is going to be a tough one. Well, there was more than one way to skin a dog. You know, Blake said conversationally, it is a little frustrating how he acts like he can tell us what to do. Exactly! Weiss agreed. He's our team leader. That doesn't mean he's infallible. He was injured and he needed rest. That's all there was to it. And if he looked after himself better, we would have brought him along. Precisely! Really, he has no one to blame but himself. I couldn't agree more. Weiss smiled and nodded, her eyes lighting up with an indulgent fire. It's not like we went out of our way to inconvenience him, she went on, because now she was on a roll and didn't need Blake's input. He acts like what we did was completely ridiculous, but we stopped the White Fang and got out relatively unharmed. Maybe he should take lessons from us. Blake smiled. Weiss slammed her hands down on the table and stood up. A few people in the library looked their way in annoyance, but quickly went back to their books when they saw who it was. You're absolutely right. He could stand to learn a few lessons from us, and I'm not sure how many times I've said as much to him. I offered to help him become a better leader. No, I promised. I promised to make him a better leader, but this is beyond a joke. He could use some lessons on not getting hurt, Blake suggested. Absolutely. I shouldn't have stopped with our morning lessons. What was I thinking? Teamwork too. If he wants to do everything on his own, that fool. Exercises together? Blake asked, since that would require them to actually stand next to one another without coming to blows. Well, at least he's being more proactive of late, Blake said. Though maybe a little too proactive. He's gone too far in the opposite direction. Weiss agreed. I didn't think I would ever say it, but now he needs to slow down a little and stop trying to handle everything on his own. It's not like we can't look out for ourselves, and if we are in trouble, we have a team to come to, just like you did. It sounds like he's lost his direction, Blake whispered with a barely concealed smirk. I think he needs someone to set him straight. He needs someone to beat him off the path he's on, Weiss growled. How dare he try and tell us what we can and can't do? We're the same age as him. We're just as experienced too. We went to prep schools, and I had the best education line could buy. It's almost arrogant, really, Blake shrugged. Someone should put him in his place. Oh, I will. Weiss scowled. The furious expression paused a moment later, before it drifted away to be replaced by something else. That is, as soon as he apologizes to me. Actually, Blake hefted her scroll. That's why I came by to find you. Yang managed to find Jaune and convince him to apologize. Weiss's attention snapped to her so fast, she feared the heiress might have suffered whiplash. He did? She asked. Yang can be very persuasive. Blake chuckled. That, or just plain insistent. From what I gather, he's pretty beat up about it. But he has no idea how to say sorry to you. Weiss humphed and crossed her arms before her. Why, that should be obvious, she said, on his hands and knees begging. Blake smothered her laughter, since despite the girl's harsh words, she could more than see how she stood a little taller, how she suddenly felt a little brighter. Still, she wondered if Weiss could ever imagine the scene she was describing. It felt disturbingly similar to one contained within her favorite series. Well, you know what he's like, Weiss. I guess he's too lazy to think of a way of saying sorry. Lazy? Weiss's eyes turned to chips of ice. Why that? What an insufferable man. She slammed the book shut with a loud clap, her eyes blazing a pale blue as she glared at Blake. Come on, she growled and gestured for the faunus to stand. You were going to show me where my irritating partner is, and then I shall make sure he knows exactly what I think of his latest performance. If he needs a guiding hand, then it's about time I gave him one. Well, here's to hoping Yang has been more successful, as she boasted she'd be.